Tim. I don't expect you to pronounce it. So I teach at sculpture at UTRGV, just up the road. I've been teaching there since, well, I first moved there as a lecturer in 2016, and then I took some time to do a residency in Houston, and then COVID occurred, and so I spent a little more time in Houston than I expected. And eventually I returned back to teach back at UTRGV in the sculpture department there. So I've been there since 2020. So total 2016, took a year and a half off. So I've been there pretty much almost 6 years now. And so let me just get your all's names first though. I always try to get everybody's names first. So I'm going to point to you and just tell me what you prefer to be called. And I will probably forget them at the end of this, but you know, that's life. So.
Hi, my name is Christina.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Jolette.
Jolette. Okay.
My name is Aleda.
Aleda. Okay.
My name is Alondra.
Alondra. Okay.
Dennis.
What is it?
Dennis.
Dennis. Okay.
My name is Johnny.
Johnny. All right. So I've already forgotten them. Okay. So maybe. I'm actually pretty good. Actually, I used to teach Alexis for a couple classes. She was just about graduating, and I caught her on the back end. So what we're going to do today is what I like to do for some of my early Sculpture 1 or design classes is it's inspired by an artist named Annie Albers. She's actually a weaver and a textile artist, but what she does is she does these experiments where she tries to create these patterns on boards and just using materials. So what we're going to do today is an introduction to abstract construction, because what we're going to do is each of you is going to get one board, one 12 by 12 inch square, and you're going to then create patterns on that board. But the rule is you can't use any glues, can't use any tape. You can only use gravity and the materials themselves. And also, you can't do anything objective. It has to be non-objective. So it can either only be patterns, shapes, colors, designs. So I don't want you to try and do like a bunny or a butterfly. Like that's not, the point of this assignment is to get you thinking not more abstractly. And so then so first we're going to start off with just some basic colored paper, construction paper, and then, because you'll probably get these done pretty quickly, and so then I'm going to challenge you even more, and we might go outside and collect some things outside and then incorporate those into your composition. Or we can just find stuff around the room, so because this is all temporary, so there's no glues, nothing. So once you can create a pattern, a weaving, or I like to call them material weavings, a pattern on your board, what I often get my students to do is take a picture of it and then remove everything and start over and do another one. And so usually I give my students about a week to do 6 or 7 of these. So we're going to try and do these within the class period. So any questions before we get started? Okay. So what materials have you all worked with so far in this semester? Clay. Okay. Paper mache. Okay, paper mache is great. I always do paper mache for projects too. Okay, so you're probably already familiar with some paper construction techniques. So let's go ahead and open these up and pass them around. So everyone should get one. Just cut open. And I'll also show you some paper cutting techniques that might be helpful. And please don't throw out the paper. We can always reuse it, or you can use it for paper mache later. So, and that's something that is very important to my process and how I teach. I want us to, it's very important to be responsible with the materials that you use and be considerate of that, because sculpture can be very wasteful. Okay, well, looks like everybody's got one. Okay, never mind then. And so oftentimes, if you ever come to our shop or you take classes with me, you'll actually see bins of old cardboard, paper, fabric. We tend to not throw things out, which is a very, lots of sculptors are hoarders. We like to keep materials and things, sometimes to our own detriment, and I am no exception to that. So I've had to control my tendencies a little bit more over the course of the past few years. We have to do some purge of materials and old projects and stuff, but the mentality of using what you have and being resourceful is very important, especially in my classes. So, because a lot of us, don't have access to world-class facilities. Because you might have access to those things in college and school, but that's only about 4 years. And then when you graduate, you're on your own. And so you have to, sometimes you might not have access to a wood shop. You might not have access to a clay studio. And so you have to improvise and you have to adapt. And so that's why I love sculpture the most, is because it requires more problem solving and adapting than a lot of other processes. Because oftentimes you're using materials that you've never tried before. And so that's what I love to do, is I like to use materials that have no actual history of being used as art materials and have to figure out a way to get the results I'm looking for. So a lot of testing, a lot of trial and error, a lot of failure. So getting over failure is a big part of being a sculptor, being an artist overall, and accepting the fact that failure is going to happen and being okay with that. So what we're going to do is, first we're going to just use, I would say maybe focus on 2 or 3 colors at first. And so you can kind of, choose from here. I'll just pass out a bunch, so everybody gets a good selection. And so I don't want you to worry about color theory. I don't want you to worry about, what it looks like. I just want you to make designs on your page. And so let me show you some processes that are very helpful. So a ruler, and you can draw on your board if you need to draw it out first. I don't have any problem with that. But let's say, no scissors, nothing like that. We're going to keep it very simple. And so let's say you choose a color, and maybe, I want to have, maybe I want to have some different designs, or you can either rip it by hand and just let the natural tear be the pattern itself. Because there's actually artists, one artist by the name of Hans Arp, he would actually create compositions by just having pieces of paper, and he would just drop them onto a surface, and that would be how he would determine how the composition started. And so he would just go by chance. So, but if you prefer to have more of a straight line, so there's no scissors here, so how can we get a straight line with paper? So there's a couple ways to do that. You can either fold it, if you're trying to get straight edges, fold it over again. And one thing you could do is kind of gross, but just lick it. Get that paper a little wet, and then you can just tear it. That little moisture. But if you don't want to slobber all over your paper, you can do other things too. So that's what these rulers are good for. So we'll put the metal side down, flat, and then you'll press it down and you just tear along the edge of your ruler. So this is how you get that kind of little bit torn, kind of a ripped edge, but without those clean. Actually, this will give you a better straight line than scissors will. So what I want you all to do for first is maybe just choose 2 or 3 colors and try and fill the entire board with a composition just using the colors and the shapes. And then we'll go around, we'll take a look around, and then we'll wipe them all off and we'll start again, and maybe next time we'll go and find another material to add to that. We'll progressively add a bit more materials and get a little bit crazier as we go. And it should be, so we'll try and do as many of these compositions as possible, and just make sure to take pictures before you remove anything, so you can have a documentation of it. All right, any questions, concerns? Is that instructions pretty clear? Okay, All right, so here I'll pass around some rulers too, if y'all need a couple. So I would say what you might want to do is just rip up a bunch of pieces. Don't worry so much about doing like one piece by one piece. Rip up a bunch of pieces and then just start creating a composition. And I'll work along with y'all too. So I'll kind of show an example. And if anybody has any questions about my process, the exhibition, I imagine there's a lot of questions about it, because I hope there's a lot of questions about it, because I think some people might be confused by it. But sometimes it's good to have mystery. All right, so yeah, just go ahead and start ripping or cutting the sheets. And try not to overthink it. So again, this is just for fun, no grades, nothing. We're just trying to fill our square with lines and shape and maybe some patterns. All right, or if you have questions about taking, how many of you are planning to go and to get your BFA or your bachelor's in art specifically, or not? Yep. Okay, so if you have questions about what kind of classes we offer or what to expect if you sign up for a BFA program, I'm happy to provide the best answers I can. But also a little bit about my background. I only took about 4 art classes when I was in college, so I have more of a, most of my skills that I learned in carpentry and woodworking and metal working were either through jobs or I learned, my dad taught me some things, but more often than not, I learned things through jobs and not through classrooms. So the classroom is just one place to learn things.
So this class is predominantly non-art majors.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
They've had a crash course in traditional figurative sculpture, mold making, and now they're doing Totally Matters inspired paper mache.
All right, well now you have some paper fragments to use as paper mache if you want to. Okay. All right, and the goal is to fill up the entire board. No, there should be no white background visible. So part of the reason I do this project or do this assignment for my students is because I don't believe that you should be sentimental about your artwork. I think you should make things, move on to the next thing, and try something else. I don't feel like, personally, that artwork, something you created should be considered precious. It should just be a step in your process or in your progress. And like, I am consistently moving on to different materials. I rarely ever stick with one material. I always try new things. Because I might get bored with a material and then I'll want to use something else. And so you might want to think about a process too. So something I'm doing is, instead of like going visually, I'm just doing alternating one over the other. I'm kind of just keeping that rule. And so sometimes what I like to do is give myself rules to do, thus, you know, like as a teacher giving an assignment. And so, but I also do that as an artist too. I try to give myself limitations to work within. And so if I'm alternating a piece, I have to stick with that. But then also using that to help create balance in the composition. So any processes or materials you all have found an inclination towards, or you find that speaks to you, whether it's clay or paper mache? Not everyone all at once, okay.
Johnny took to clay pretty good. His self-portrait came out nice.
Okay.
Yeah, I like
You liked,
the first one, but I don't know how to.
you don't like the air dry
No,
clay?
I don't know how to pronounce it. The mud. Is it mud or clay?
Which one?
What we were using.
The first one? That was clay. That was
Yeah.
earthenware.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad is actually, he's a ceramicist. I grew up in a clay studio. But I don't use clay, because I'm a rebel. It's fine. We get along fine. It's not like that.
Johnny opted to do his alebrije out of air dry clay to kind of compare
Oh, okay.
both mediums, and discovered he doesn't like it.
Yeah, air dry clay, it's for kids basically. It's a good like alternative, but it's not something I would consider a very viable artistic material. You can do stuff with it, but it's very limited what you can do with it. You basically have to paint over it. But yeah, sometimes I ban materials like that from my sculpture classes. Or what I often do is I encourage my students to try and spend $0 on materials in my classes. I challenge you to do that.
And that was one of the $0. They donated
Oh, okay.
us about 8 or 9 cases.
Oh, okay.
So no one's had to buy anything except paint.
Because the class, like my intermediate class, we took that to the extreme though, is we actually went to the McAllen Recycling Center and we went through their dumpsters and pulled a lot of metal, recycled metal from their dumpsters. So, you know, I practice what I preach. And the same thing with the materials in there. Pretty much the only materials I spent money on were the glues and some of the tools to drill through metal. But other than that, most materials didn't really cost me anything. That being said, you always have the option of whether to spend money or spend time. And more often than not, people would rather spend money than spend time on things. So there's always that balance. Oh, okay.
Center. So we just finished our refractory molds for our little bas reliefs. And now now we're gonna see what happens without introducing any chemical additives, like how hot we have to get the glass for it to stick.
Oh yeah, because like some glass is very sensitive to temperature, and well, glass is a very fickle material to work with. It doesn't always do what you want it to do.
That's our recycle project.
Right.
Or they can bring bottles or glass from home and see what happens.
Right. So, okay, there's one. And don't worry, we're going to get a little crazier as we go. This one is very simple and basic. I encourage my students to always get weird. So we're going to get weird later. So usually when I do this assignment, I have 7 things that my students do. 1 using paper, 1 using kind of like brightly colored objects, 1 that uses soft materials, 1 that uses hard materials, 1 that uses natural materials. So usually I give like a lot of options to choose from. But we're doing one of them. Actually, one I do is actually paper. And sometimes what also is fun is to use like paper from like comic books and things like that. It's almost like collaging without using any glue or adhesive. All right, and if you've finished, make sure to take a picture. Oh, you don't like it? Okay. Well, I would say continue with your thoughts because it's just temporary. So don't.
You're gonna have to let go of control, Alondra.
Yeah, because a lot of my students, when they first sign up for classes, I usually give them an abstract assignment. So many people hate abstract art. I don't understand it. Like, how can you hate something you know nothing about? So it's a challenge for a lot of people. But I get a little kick out of seeing people struggle a little bit. So.
My favorite part is ripping paper.
Huh?
My favorite part is ripping paper.
Yeah, paper ripping it's very cathartic. It releases some energy. But part of probably what some of the difficulty is trying to do abstract is that you don't have any reference. You don't have anything to like look at and say, I don't know what this is supposed to look like. It looks like exactly what it's supposed to look like. Yes, yeah, you could take a picture and then clear it off. And I want everyone to do at least one, and then once everyone has done at least one, we'll take our boards outside and we'll do something else. We'll make sure to go someplace in the shade, though. And if you're waiting, just start another one. Like, there's no time limit. No, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. You're doing great. See, what you're doing is you're considering the composition, and you're trying to consider balance, which is exactly what you should be doing. So. So yeah, so if one of yours was a bit more kind of random, maybe try one that has a bit more order to it. So if I'm going to do something like this, I'm just going to get rid of it all. And now instead of maybe being more random, now I'll try to do something a bit more kind of structured. So maybe I want to have straight lines, but have the pieces of paper be kind of ripped up. And I'll use my ruler as an edge guide. Just leave it. Just keep adding. Just fill in the space. Don't try and destroy it. It's only temporary, so if you don't like it, you can just get rid of it later.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I said, I don't know.
it's okay. That's why we're not using any glues or adhesive. If you don't like it, you can just wipe it off and start again. But I would say finish it through before you do that. But once we get done with the paper ones, we'll go outside and do a bit more adventurous, do a bit more material based. course it is. We only do masterpieces in my classes.
That's true.
Told you you'd be seeing paper again.
Oh, do you not have a good relationship with paper?
They just finished doing
Oh.
mosaic portraits by collage.
Ah, okay.
From only art-based magazines. I was able to glue it.
Yep, no glue this time.
No glue.
So also this process teaches you to work with the material, not force it to do something that it's not willing to do.
Yeah, in design one, we just finished collage and now we've moved on to.
Oh, okay. Collage. When I was asked to teach a 2D class, I don't know why they asked me to do that. Collage was my go-to thing because I can't draw very well, but collage is a much more sculpture-y kind of process. Maybe. Do one with red. All right, so take a picture of it.
You have to commit it to your phone forever. No, we'll put it in your portfolio at the end of the semester.
It
It's
does
part
look
of a
like a
project.
circle.
It does look like a circle.
No, I'll do this. We got the same color idea.
Very pastel. All right, so we'll do about 5 more minutes of this, and then we'll kind of just take a look around. Well, what we'll do is we'll go outside. We'll take our boards and go outside, and then we'll play around with another component that I usually do, which is using natural materials. So anything you find on the ground, leaves, plants, flowers. Huh?
Nice girl.
Yeah, if you can catch it and keep it on. Or you know what? Squirrel prints, little footprints on there. If you can put a little food on there, I don't know, have like a little squirrel finger painting or something on the board. But they're pretty hard to catch, so.
Ours are weirdly friendly.
Oh, probably because
They have,
students
like,
feed them all the
yeah,
time.
Yeah, they have like no natural predators will like come right up to you.
Oh.
Be, like, loiter
Well, there you
along.
go then. Just like give it a little bribe, give it some granola or something.
It bites me.
Oh, they bite?
Catch 22.
Just bite it back.
Yeah, just fight back. It's smaller than you. You need tweezers or something. Don't blow it on.
She can't even yell at her pieces right now.
You gotta stay calm. So it can work.
You know those vinyl campaign posters? Tim has made clothes out of that.
Oh. They're not comfortable, but they are wearable.
And collage portraits, some of them. You build a loom or what, guys?
It's actually peaceful.
Yeah, it feels peaceful.
The difference.
Oh.
I mean, when we read the first chapters of Art and Fear, we had discussed our inability to kind of let go and just make, you know?
I can't let go.
Which is what you said then.
Yeah, that's kind of the philosophy is my classes is I'm going to push you out of your comfort zone. So just if you take a class with me, beware.
You're probably gonna end up taking Tim if you're gonna go into design and sculpture.
You're so close. I mean, you're doing fine. The fact that you're frustrated means you care, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, wait till I print some of these and put them in the hallway for tomorrow.
Post them on Instagram and, you know.
What's your IG handle, Amanda?
Or I guess TikTok is the thing now.
Apparently artists still favor Instagram. TikTok is just where they do, what did you guys call it, brain rot?
I post
just
on
check.
Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Oh, okay.
I haven't posted anything because I haven't liked anything that I've made so far. And I still have to finish the skull, so I can post another video. Where
When
I just,
Michelangelo portrait turned
where I
out
just
really
get
well.
like 20 likes.
I would recommend don't decide your artistic ability based on Instagram or TikTok likes.
Yeah.
Like, I'll post something about my artwork, it'll get some likes, but then I'll post a picture of my cat and it gets twice as many likes. So, like, go figure. So, don't. The algorithm is not beneficial.
Combine that, if your cat is making the art,
Yeah, if you have a cat in your picture somehow, that's a cheat code.
Make sure to take a picture.
Okay. All right. So I think everybody got one completed. All right. Take a picture of it. Even if you don't like it, you can leave this workshop and delete them all. Wipe it from your memory. I don't care.
You want to make a sculpture out of it?
No, they're just sculptures. Colors.
So something that is really fun to do with paper mache is if you do that in paper mache and then you sand it, it'll give like a marbling kind of effect, kind of look. So
We can do that.
yeah, so you just want to get it glued on to your surface and just have those layered colors, sand it down a little bit, and then it'll look kind of like, almost like stone or marble. It'll look really interesting. So,
You can make it into a ball.
all right, now let's wipe them off. Get rid of them. Okay. Release the energy. All right, so now what we're gonna do is I want everybody to take one square and one ruler as well. And we're gonna go outside. We're gonna find a spot that's a little bit shady. All right, make sure to take a ruler with you though.
12 inches.
Go. Okay. So, sorry. So, have fun.
Look, there's your squirrel. Come, squirrel. I need you.
You can put some food on there and, get some squirrel paw prints. But try and look at everything around you. There's stones, rocks, leaves. Everything is fair game. Even trash. If you find wrappers or a cigarette butt, that might be interesting too. Now, there's probably a bunch of acorns right here. Oh, there's a whole ton. Also consider using the acorns themselves as one component, and then maybe the caps of the acorn is a different one. Like these parts can be different components. You can kind of section them off. Okay, yeah. plenty of those around. Does anybody want a gold star on their composition?
Gold star.
Gold star? No. Here. What you might want to try, if you're trying to get crisp, clean lines, is have another ruler, kind of have space them out and use the other ruler.
I think I'm gonna use this.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Scoot it.
Okay, yeah.
I'll be fine if it's a little.
Yes, be okay with a little bit of mess. Maybe think about repeating one of these elements kind of over and over again to kind of create more texture. So something like, I think this combination of, adding the petals at the end of the sticks, what if you do that for all the sticks? Have a little bit of those red petals at the end of each stick. Have some consistency in the composition. Yep, there's probably a lot of those snail shells. And if you find enough of them, you can probably do something with those. Well, you seem to be a bit more comfortable with this than the paper.
It's because the paper would move a lot, and that would bother me.
Yeah. Well, it's probably because you expect the paper to do what you want, but these materials, you're kind of just at the whim of their tendencies. Maybe think about also, since some of these leaves are more red, is kind of having a gradient, like they get increasingly more red as you go. But yeah, you got the right idea.
Yeah, but they're different kinds. That's why I told you. I don't know. Who knows which one they have there?
One, two, three, four, six.
More petals.
Go get them.
Are you looking for the orange ones or the red ones?
Doing a mix.
Here's a few more. There we go.
That looks pretty good, Dennis. All right, so once you're finished, if you are finished, just take a picture of it, and then I'll have another one for us to do
once everybody else is done. Yeah, if you're done with it, you can kind of, because what we're going to do next is we're going to do a group composition. All right.
Not the parking though, that would be littering.
All right. Okay. So everybody finished? Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to combine our squares together. We're going to make a grid of 6. I think there's 6 total people. And then each of you is going to choose one element to fill your square with, and we'll make a whole composition out of all these. So let's put our squares someplace that's not very in the way. Actually, it might be interesting if we just, no, we'll do them right here. So kind of 2 and 2, so a little block of 6 together. And so then each of you will choose one element to fill your board with. And so then we'll do the other 3 right there. Okay, so we want to try and do something from every aspect of nature. So something from the ground, maybe a leaf, maybe a flower, maybe a stone. So I want each of you to choose one thing to focus on though. So we'll divvy out, so rocks, okay. We got one doing leaves, sticks, okay. Who said leaves? Leaves. Who wants to flowers? What else we got? We got soil, we got bark, we got acorns. Soil, okay. And then who has not chosen something yet? Grass, okay. So go ahead, and so your goal is to fill up the entire board with your chosen material.
So only in our square?
Yes, just your one square. And you want to make sure it stays within that square.
So I could only choose one square?
Yeah, just one square.
Put all the twigs on it?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, you might want to think about just taking the flowers and just kind of like sprinkling them from the top. Kind of let gravity take course.
I'm hoping to print some of the
Hey, how's it going?
images of the pieces they've made and then put them up for the show. Let's see if Layla can help me. Layla, or you or someone?
How many?
I'm gonna see what she says.
Ruh-roh.
Have to be in your side.
All right, which is more fun, the paper or the natural materials? Huh?
Which one did you like more, the inside or the outside workshop? Inside? Aircon? Really?
Oh, well, I can't control that.
That's nature, yeah?
I think you'll survive, though. I mean,
On you.
I'm not the one that makes it 90 degrees in November, so.
Have you adjusted to that living down here yet?
I was just in Chicago last weekend, so I kind of like,
Good research.
I like it here
Yeah.
during, I'd rather be 88 in November than 40 in November. All right. Well, don't worry, we'll be going inside just a minute. We're almost done. Okay. Cool. All right. Cool. So now we have this, whatever you want to call it. So this nature composition, a nature collage. Usually when I do this assignment for my classes, yeah, this is always one of the components that I ask for, is using just natural materials, because a lot of the materials that you already use do come from nature, so it's good to understand your sources. So, because each of these can be transformed into something else, because, I mean, stone, we have masonry, concrete, sticks, wood, which is used for all different kinds of things, soil, which is, you know, where plants grow, grass itself, a living plant, flowers, another, you know, instance of color, nature and color, color in nature, and then leaves, you know, something symbolic of, yeah, just dump them in. Don't overthink it.
I don't have enough.
It's okay.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, she's got rocks in her pockets.
Yeah.
That's dedication right there. Okay. All right. So, all right. Any questions? Y'all, okay, want to go back inside?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll go back inside. So we'll just dump them out. So that's the nice thing. You can just put it back where you found it. No mess. And then what we can do is we can go inside the gallery, and you all can has anybody checked this out beforehand? Okay.
I thought they were still working on it.
Oh, no. Well, that is, does it look unfinished? Yeah? Why do you think that?
Because last time there was a bunch of art.
Oh, so this isn't art?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, it's art. But there was like a lot of art.
Yeah. Well,
Material of different types of.
okay. So, what makes this different from what you normally see?
Painting.
Okay. Paintings. So it's on the wall, right? So something I always tell my students when they start venturing into sculpture or 3D arts is that, a painting, a drawing, that's inside of a frame. Like, you're just concerned about that. When you're working with 3D, you have to worry about the whole room. And so so when I do a composition like this or an installation like this, I'm not just thinking about what something goes where. I think about the entire room and how someone walks through the space and enters it. So there's also kind of some hidden things, some hidden elements related to this plant itself. So do y'all recognize what this plant is? Okay. Huh? No, it's not bamboo. It looks like it, but it's not bamboo. It grows everywhere around here. It's a type of cane. So do y'all see those, like the images of those? So this is, Nope. So this is actually the river canes that grow all along the canals. So you see that really tall grass that grows everywhere? That's this stuff. So this is Arundo donax. It's also called carrizo. It's called giant reed, giant cane. So something that really appealed to me about this particular material is that, one, it's considered an invasive plant, an invasive species. So it's actually damaging a lot of our agricultural areas. It crowds out native plants and things like that. And it basically overtakes, wherever it grows, it just spreads. So how many of you consider this like just part of the natural environment, like not thinking much about it? So there's actually a lot of history behind this plant. Here we consider it basically a weed that just takes over areas. But if you go back to where it actually comes from, which is originally it comes from the Middle East, the Mediterranean area, it actually has a very long history of use and function. So has anybody ever played a saxophone, clarinet, or any woodwind instruments? No? Kind of close, but so those instruments, they use what's known as reeds. So if you ever see a saxophone or a clarinet player, they have like a reed in their mouth that they're getting wet. That little reed, it vibrates as you blow air through it, and that's what creates the noise in the instrument. That reed actually comes from this plant. So it has a long history in musical instruments as the reed element for either like oboes, clarinets, bassoons, any instrument like that. It's also has been used in the Middle East to create structures called motifs, which are basically like, they're very similar to a longhouse, like a Native American longhouse structure. They're more ceremonial, but this plant is actually used for that. So, and it's also has a lot of qualities as a potential biofuel. So it's been used to try and, like, some scientists have tried to extract fuel from this plant because it grows very fast. Another, also in Italy, right after World War II, they actually tried to harvest this plant to make fiber and fabric out of it, which is what rayon is. Rayon is essentially a type of fabric that's made from plant materials, but it's sort of synthetic, sort of natural, but you can actually extract fibers from this to create fabric. But a lot of that is lost because this is just seen as a weed that grows everywhere. So what I'm trying to propose through my work is that, well, looking at past historical uses, instead of seeing this as a weed that just grows everywhere, why don't we see it as a kind of resource or something that could be used for something? So based on my sculpture skills and kind of my background, I was interested, well, what if I try to make furniture out of it? And so it took me a long time to figure out a way to construct with this material, because like y'all were getting frustrated with some of the paper and some of the elements of like using knot glues and kind of like, or even if you're using clay or other materials that are getting frustrating for you, amplify that times 10, because this stuff is even way more frustrating than that. Because one, very few glues will actually work with this, and you can't use it like normal wood. So, and even you can't really use it like normal bamboo either, because you see a lot of bamboo structures and baskets and stuff like that being made. But it's very similar to bamboo, but it doesn't work like bamboo. So what I did as an artist was I had to do a lot of experiments. I had to do a lot of tests. I had to do a lot of trial and error to find a way where I could actually create a structure or create something that would hold together, but also resemble the natural material itself and not kind of take away from it too. So I settled on, just trying to keep it simple, making stools. So you can actually see, if you look inside, you can see some elements of the pegs that go through here. Yeah, you can see them go through. And so you can actually see they're all held together by little pegs. And so each stick has about 2 pegs kind of put into there. So it takes a while to make these. And getting it to the point where it's actually usable and functional as a stool, it took a while to get that large. And then from there, I figured it's like, well, what if stools are fun or nice, have like it's almost like a sacrificial circle or like a seance we can go out, have here going. So then I took that idea and I started, well, what if I go bigger and start making benches instead of stools? Because I wanted to have a video installation, and normally with video installations, there's always a bench that people can sit on. But I wanted to make that bench as a reference to not just it being a material for like visual stimulation, but also something that can be used as part of the furniture. So for example, this piece right here, these two, I consider this one piece. I don't consider it 2 separate things. They're both related, because what you see in the image is actually video kind of showing the sunset being shown on the plant itself as it's responding to wind. It's also, I played around with the camera work of it by I used 3 different cameras on one tripod. And so each camera has its own different kind of view, and then I combine those all together to create a video sequence. So actually, like one camera is just like my phone camera, another is like an older camcorder, and then another one is actually an old video iPod, like that still had the click wheel on it too. It had like something that has like really high resolution all the way to something that has really low resolution, because I wasn't really concerned about video quality, because it's being projected on something that's going to degrade the video anyway. But the thing I love about that iPod camera is that it has a really saturated color. So anywhere you see like the really bright kind of darker colors, that's the iPod camera, which is, it only lasted for it could only take so much video, but but it was, and the battery kept dying, so I had to hook it up to a battery while I was running it, and And it also kept falling down too because it's so tiny. It was like just a little tiny iPod mini. So it was, and then the other component of this installation is this. So again, this composition here that you see surrounding the walls, I consider this one piece as well. I don't consider it multiple pieces put together. I consider it one idea, and so one concept. And so you'll actually see, what do you see with the materials happening though? Like what are some of the clues that you see? Like are there any kind of specific elements or pieces that you can see in not just the sticks themselves, but also the metal pieces?
You can make art out of it.
Potentially.
With little scraps, that's not gonna be used.
But what do they reference? It's like, do you see specific components or specific things? Okay, so car parts. Right, there's a dryer in there. Okay, what was that again?
Usually parts that you see on an everyday basis.
So yeah, so basically everyday materials, everyday objects. So a lot of this stuff is considered, I mean, it was literally trash when I used it. Well, some of it wasn't, but the dryer was, it didn't work anymore, but instead of giving it to the dump, I decided to cut it up. But there's also, does anybody see any kind of like symbols or stickers that, it's like, where the hell did you get that thing from? What? Oh, the Border Patrol one. It's like, what do you think that one's about? So did you know that this plant is actually the Border Patrol or Homeland Security is also trying to get rid of this plant because where does it grow along? What's the main river around here? Okay, so this stuff grows all along the Rio Grande, and Border Patrol is trying to get rid of it. Why do you think they're trying to get rid of it? So, because like what do people do on that river? Yeah, so where do you think they hide? In the reeds. So there's a lot of layers to this particular plant because I mean it's, you know, on one hand it's considered an invasive species that takes over areas, but also it's considered a nuisance because it's preventing Homeland Security from I guess doing their job. But their proposal is to introduce an insect that would actually eat this plant. But oftentimes trying to solve the problem actually makes it worse because let's say you introduce an insect that eats this plant away, but then that insect starts to eat other plants too, like native plants that grow around it. So it doesn't just eat this one, it eats everything. And you pretty much just made the problem way worse than it actually was to begin with. So there's lots of, so that's something I like to do in my work is include little clues as to so you're not necessarily gonna get all those insights just from viewing it, but there's a lot of context within just this plant. It's not just, you know, sticks put in stuff, though that's what it looks like, obviously. But this plant, and what I'm trying to showcase is that when we view plants like this as invasive, it's more perception than it is anything having to do with any kind of scientific study. Like there's no scientific proof that this plant is going to destroy the environment. It's really just perception. Like we don't like this plant because it messes with nature, our view of what nature should be. But our view of what nature should be is just the human view. Like humans don't have as much control over the environment as we think. And oftentimes a plant like this that's spreading is a result of human intervention in nature anyway. Because this plant was brought here intentionally over a couple hundred years ago as a decorative plant in most cases. I mean, It's debated. It's not really known why it was brought here to begin with, but more than likely, usually plants come here because people think they look pretty and they want to put them in their garden, and then they just start spreading and spreading and spreading, and so that's what happened with this plant. So, it did not just come here overnight. This came here about probably a couple hundred years ago, and we're just seeing the effects of it now. So, well, we've been seeing the effects of it for several decades, but it's not a new problem, or it's not a new issue, but humans trying to solve it is a very old practice. And what I'm trying to argue is that we should be viewing these as resources, not necessarily as moments, ways to destroy where we live. So whether or not that will actually come through, it's hard to say. But what I'm trying to do as an artist is to show how it can be used as a potential material rather than just seeing it as a nuisance. Because it's here, we can't get rid of it, so we might as well try and figure out a way to use it rather than trying to just, because oftentimes when you try to destroy something, there's a lot of consequences to that, unintentional consequences. So yeah, that's kind of, and the statement that on the front does help out with kind of giving a background of what this project is about. And I've been doing research on invasive plants and invasive species for a long time, ever since graduate school, because usually there's a history behind each plant, behind everything. For example, when I lived in Chicago, there's this plant called buckthorn that is a tree that basically just grows. It spreads everywhere. It takes over areas. But again, it was viewed as an invasive species that was kind of destroying the area. But then if you look to the history of it, where it originally comes from, which is like Persia, the Middle East, it actually has been used as a plant for dyeing fabric for thousands of years. And so that inspired me to, okay, well, let me use that past research or that past use to inform what we could currently use it for too. So in that case, I got all different colors from just that one tree. So the bark would make this really amazing orange or yellow. The wood made a really amazing orange color. The leaves would make kind of a yellowish color, and then the berries would actually make a bright green color. So there's a lot of history in each of these materials and each of these plants that often goes unnoticed because our perception of these plants is kind of, it's made to be negative. We're conditioned to think of these as weeds when ultimately the definition of a weed is purely a human perception. So like nature, the environment, they don't have any differentiation between weeds. Actually, the domestic plants that we grow in these areas, nature would probably consider those weeds, not these plants, not the plants that grow in native areas. So there's lots of, so I could talk a lot about it. Do you all have any questions or thoughts or insight?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Can you talk about it, kind of gives me a bit more of like context to the exhibit?
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, maybe not so much about this one, but where do you see yourself going in the future with this project?
Well, what I'm trying to do in my position at UTRGV is I'm trying to get grants to start doing what I would consider called an invasive materials lab. And so basically I'm trying to run a class where we actually go to areas where we see invasive plants, or not just invasive plants, but invasive species overall, research their history and experiment with them and continue to experiment and see what ways they can be used. Because there is a lot of history for this plant being used in industry. The problem is capitalism or business will view this in terms of like, can it be scaled up to a business that can make a profit? But it's hard to do that when you're just experimenting and doing things that aren't necessarily scalable to a business level. So where I see myself going with this is going bigger and continuing. So what I'm trying to also do is see if I can make paper from this, because it's a very fibrous material, or can it be used as potentially as like a glaze for ceramics. It can be burned into ash because it has a high silica content. So what I want to do isn't necessarily what I'm going to be doing as an artist, but more so sharing this knowledge and allowing other people to take it from there. So having being more of a collaborative interdisciplinary practice rather than just making artwork, because I think just making artwork out of this stuff is a very kind of like, it's a very small, it's not expanding the scope of the concept. It's really just, so my artistic practice is going to probably be combined with my teaching practice to make more of a laboratory environment. So, well, I'm just waiting to hear back from some grant sources, see if I get money for it. Yep.
For you, John, right now that you're like really into oil painting, researching and creating natural pigments based on different species and genuses of plants could be an area of continued study. Like you said, it has a very high silica content.
Yeah.
So what kind of, pigment can be extracted from that would be a good question. Because you can make your own oil paints if you want that.
Yeah.
That is true. I mean, like, what kind of, what's the process on that to make your own pigments?
Well, it depends on your source. I mean, I don't have much experience with making pigments, more so natural dyes. And natural dyes are probably a lot easier than paints because basically you cook the dye, you cook the plant material so it extracts the color, and then you can dye it onto fabric. For pigments, however, you would probably need to turn it into some kind of powder and add a binder. So pigments often work best. There's some plant materials you can use to get pigments from, but from what I understand, a lot of pigments actually come from like minerals, like rocks, stone, like like lapis lazuli is used to make blue. It's kind of crushed up. I mean, nowadays it's mostly chemicals, like heavy metals like cobalt, cadmium, things like that. But I mean, something that actually has a lot of history around here and can probably use as a pigment is cochineal, which, are any of you familiar with cochineal, the little red bug that grows on the cacti? That has been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years as a very bright red dye or a very bright red color. And it's something that grows right around here. Like you can find cochineal on some of the nopales that grow around here. And that can be used as a natural pigment. But it also has a lot of history behind it too. So ultimately, probably what you would have to do is, if you're trying to get pigments from plant materials, is you would have to cook it to extract as much color as you can, and then find some way to kind of turn it into some kind of powder. And so you just need to extract that color. So there's what is more promising with natural dyes is actually watercolors, like ink washes, things like that. I actually used to do an assignment where we would cook stuff you find in the supermarket, cook it down into a ink wash, add a little Arabic gum to it, and so you can almost use it like water, like watercolors. So, but you would probably want to talk with a painter about making pigments. Like, I don't have much experience with it, but I know you would probably need to get some form of powder, like turn it into some kind of powder. Like, I mean, if you want to try something, I would say try maybe turmeric. It has that really bright yellow color. Or even just like spices. You can try spices that are already in a powder form and see if those can actually make some kind of oil paint. The other issue with oil paint is since it's a natural material, it can degrade over time. So that's something to also be considering of. Yeah. Well, usually sometimes what I did for an assignment is I would have students, so like, for example, like, okay, you make an ink from a strawberry, and now you have to draw that strawberry with the ink that you made it from. So kind of a conceptual way of creating inks and playing around with that idea. So something we're doing I'm actually teaching a class right now where we're doing natural dyes. I said, well, what if you extracted a dye from all the ingredients in guacamole and had a catalog of what would the avocado dye look like, what would the onion dye look like, what would a tomato dye look like, and kind of see how that would turn out. And so you don't have to go like to really exotic kind of substances and materials. You can find a lot of stuff just in the supermarket. Like yellow onion skins make a really nice yellow golden dye. Red cabbage is a really interesting, actually red cabbage has been used to do some like DIY cyanotypes, which is like using light to expose the colors. So yeah, like there's lots of different paths you can go down. It's really just about what fits within your your process. All right.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Any other questions? You can also say what you didn't like or don't understand too. Because I imagine a lot of people think that, they're just not going to say that to my face though. So, but,
Here's one then.
okay.
Can you tell me a bit more about the process of you choosing the bases for these installations?
It's really, so whenever I do installations, I always think less is more. Like, you don't want to overstuff it, you don't want to overfill it, because I had a whole plan, because my original idea for this installation was very different, but that was like 2 years ago, so things have changed since that time. But pretty much my goal for an installation is like, I want to have some element of simplicity. I don't want it to be overly complicated because there's a lot of content within the material and the composition itself. So if I try to do like too much, that can kind of like give you too much information. I don't want to overload the viewer with information. Also, whenever I do an installation, I always think about somebody that's in the gallery by themselves, because that's how I like to view work. Like viewing artwork in a reception setting is probably one of the worst ways to view artwork, because you have everybody to deal with, and like you don't actually have you don't actually look at the artwork. You're often talking with people and eating the food. It's like it's better to. So for this particular one, I wanted people to come in like with a small group or just by themselves. So kind of have like a quiet, kind of solemn, like if you just want to sit down and watch a video, just kind of repeat it on loop. And you could probably lay down if you really wanted to on this. Or even kind of like for this one in particular, having more of a kind of communal space, kind of using the furniture as a way to kind of like, because the stools are oriented in a way where you have to look across from somebody across from you. And so hopefully it encourages like conversation or kind of, how these potential materials can be used as, something maybe like public furniture or kind of creating these kind of compositions. And then for the piece, and so the piece outside, along the walls is, I wanted to fill up the space, but have it be one piece. And so when I do something like this, I consider this one piece. I don't consider it multiple pieces together. And so what I tried to do with this was to highlight the element, so the age that we're living in is considered the Anthropocene, which is kind of the human age. And so, but also, which means that there's a mix of natural and non-natural elements in our environment, or it's really been impacted by that. So whether or not you believe in climate change or whether or not it's, something that, you think about daily, like nature is either overtaking what we've built or we're trying to dominate nature. Usually it's not always a very kind of a symbiotic relationship. However, so with this particular plant though, it is such an aggressive and fast-growing plant that it can grow through. So it's actually inspired by how the plant would actually grow among the trash. It'll grow along oftentimes this grows along the canals, and along the canals you actually see a lot of trash in the canals themselves. And so that was actually inspired. Well, the plant can actually, come from, it can grow in such terrible soil in such terrible conditions. It's like, maybe it evolves to the point where it can actually set roots in metal and grow from that. Because something to consider about, especially these types of plants, is like our perception of time really influences how we view the environment, because we only can view the environment within our lifespans. And so something like this plant, maybe 1,000, 5,000 years from now, it's completely integrated into the environment. It's not considered invasive, because that's how biodiversity happens. But we can't conceive of that because our amount of time on Earth is much slower or much faster. Whereas this process of evolution takes a long time, and we're just seeing the effects. Like this moment of time, it's just like a small drop in the bucket of how long it actually takes for plants and animals to be kind of incorporated into the environment. So that's kind of what inspired this, but also the presence of like all kinds of man-made materials. Specifically I chose metal because it's probably one of the most industrial, and it's very emblematic of man-made materials as opposed to other things like concrete or stone, which could be kind of debatable, whether those completely man-made. Well, they are man-made, but metal is a distinctly man-made material that requires lots of processing and lots of resources. And so combining those two elements is symbolic of the Anthropocene, the age that we're living in, which is a mix, like not always a good relationship between natural environment and the human world, or the human environment. I hope that answers your question.
It did.
Okay.
All right, well, I hope you guys will join us and Tim tomorrow for the art talk at 1 p.m. With more of your questions. And I hope you enjoyed the workshop.
Yeah. So if you want to take sculpture at UTRGV, you've been warned. Like, this is, like, now you know who you're going to deal with. Okay. So, all right. But thanks, you all, for coming. And we can go back in the classroom. But thank you.